Hi everyone and welcome to my channel today. I'm Melissa. Today we are going to make homemade spaghetti and meatballs. So what I have with me today is about 1 1/4 pound of ground beef, and I have a mixture of ingredients in here. I have 1 teaspoon of olive oil, I have half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, I have 1 clove of garlic, and I have 1 egg. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this all in together. We're going to make the meatballs. So what I need to do is I just need to mix it up like this. So I'm going to go ahead and shape the meatballs. I like for my meatballs to be a little bit on the bigger side, but you can do whatever you want to do. You can make them a lot smaller. If you make them smaller, you will have a lot more, obviously. So here's one right here. And just as a rule of thumb, the bigger your meatballs, the longer it's going to take for you to cook them the way you want to, because you don't want them to be raw on the inside. So that's just an important tidbit to remember, that if you're making bigger meatballs, you have to give it plenty of cooking time in the skillet. So we're going to go ahead and shape these up, and they're not going to be perfect, but you just roll them up. But the egg is really good also for keeping the meatballs intact like this. The breadcrumbs help, but I'm just not real big on the breadcrumbs. They're very popular, but you know, I've even heard people using dried oatmeal. So whatever your personal preference is fine. I wanted to use ground lamb, but unfortunately the grocery store didn't have any. You can use ground turkey, ground beef, which is what I have here, ground chicken. I've heard of ground chicken meatballs. Whatever floats your boat. So if you have a dietary restriction or if you have a meat preference, you can pretty much do anything you want. Okay, this is my final meatball, and we're going to go ahead and put it in the skillet. Okay, so now we are going to put the meatballs in the skillet. So what I did was I put just a little bit of olive oil in my skillet just to lubricate it, and we're going to put the meatballs in one by one. The important thing when cooking meatballs is to make sure that they cook evenly. You want to make sure that you don't leave them on one particular side for too long. You want to rotate them on a pretty frequent basis. And as you can see, this one right here is already getting pretty brown on one side, so I have to go ahead and flip it over because I don't want it to get too brown with the other side being raw. So you just flip it over evenly like this and be very gentle to keep your meatballs from breaking. And like I said earlier, the bigger the meatballs, the longer it's going to take to cook. So if you prefer to make smaller meatballs, it's very important that you turn them even more frequently than you would a bigger meatball. All right. And then you just keep turning them. I'm going to just leave it on for just a moment or so. And sometimes I have to reshape the meatballs if the turning causes it to lose its shape a little bit, but that's not too bad. Okay, and you are going to see juices coming out of the meatball. It's going to start out being a little pink tinged, and then as they become more cooked, the juices that come out of the meatballs will turn clear. So it just all depends on how well you like for your meat to be cooked. And then sometimes I will turn them on their side like this just to get the little sides browned, and that'll help it to cook evenly, and it'll minimize the chance of you undercooking your meatballs because you want to make sure they're cooked pretty well. Okay, so the juices appear to be pretty clear when I put pressure on the meatballs, and you can see they're a nice brown color. But the juices that come out when I put pressure on the meatballs are pretty clear. So this is actually a 96% lean ground beef. So I think it's like only 4% fat. So there's really not that much grease and oil that's coming out of the meatballs because of that. Now I will tell you a little dirty secret of mine. Whatever comes out of the meatballs, whatever oil or juices or grease that comes out of the meatballs, sometimes I include that in the sauce because it gives it extra flavoring. Okay, it may not be very healthy, but it's very tasty. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to incorporate the sauce. Now, I'm turning this down all the way to the minimum setting, so which is like a low or a simmer, depending on what type of appliance you have. So I'm turning it all the way down low because at this point we're going to just marinate the sauce and simmer, and we really don't need to do high temperature cooking anymore. The meatballs were cooked on a medium temperature, so if you have numbers on your stove, I had it at about a 2, maybe a 3. I really don't recommend going far beyond a 2 or 3. Because the hotter your skillet is, the higher the likelihood of burning the meatballs. So that was the setting that I'm on. Now I'm on the minimum setting. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 16 ounces of just pure tomato sauce. We are making this sauce from scratch. So we're going to put everything that we need in here. Here's 8 ounces, and then this is 16 ounces. There we go. Okay, I also have another clove of finely chopped garlic. I have half a teaspoon of salt. I have just a dash of pepper. I'm going to just put that all in. I may actually need the spoon to get it. There we go. Do the best I can. I may still salt to taste. I still may put some salt in to taste. We'll see how it goes. All right, so I got that. And then I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon of oregano. 1 teaspoon of oregano. And then put in some basil. It comes out to be about half a teaspoon. So I'm going to do that. It's just easier. And then you're going to need, on top of all that, anywhere from 6 to 8 ounces of tomato paste. Tomato paste gives it a rich color, but tomato paste will also thicken. I may need a spoon for this. I don't know why I'm trying to shake this out. There we go. I like for my sauce to be very thick and savory. I don't really like for it to be very thin, because a lot of times what I'll do is the first night I'll do like a spaghetti and meatballs or rigatoni and meatballs, penne pasta, and meatballs, rotini and meatballs. But then sometimes for lunch, if I'm going to work, I'll pack myself a meatball sub or something like that. So I like to have a thicker sauce because when it's very thin and runny, it makes it really hard to make a sandwich out of the meatballs. But that's just me, to each his own. But I do love the thickening of the tomato paste. And like I said, also it'll give it more of a rich color. Try to get this out. It's just so thick. There we go. Trying not to use my finger for the camera, but if I were not being filmed right now, I'd probably use my finger. There we go. I got most of it. Okay. And then I also put in 2 teaspoons of grated Parmesan cheese. So that's all going in like this. And then finally, I slice a lemon, a fresh lemon. I take the seeds out before I squeeze it, but I squeeze lemon juice into the marinade just like this. It gives it a nice citrusy flavor. I really make sure I have good juices in here. Very good. And lemon has such a very strong flavor that even though I'm only putting in a little bit of juice, you'd be surprised at how flavorful it makes the, that might have been a loose seed. You'd be surprised at how flavorful the sauce is just from that little bit of juice. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and mix this all in. You want to make sure that you're evenly mixing the tomato paste in with the tomato sauce, because the tomato sauce is noticeably thinner and lighter than the tomato paste, and you want it to be a uniform mixture. Yeah, just like that. Some people like whole tomatoes and then we'll just cut them up. If you like the chunks of tomatoes in your sauce, that's perfectly fine. But making a nice homemade marinara sauce, you're going to limit the amount of chemicals, preservatives, and sodium that could be found in pre-made sauces. And it's just as tasty, if not better, you know. This marinade tastes very similar to the spaghetti sauce that you taste at Maggiano's restaurant. I can't make an official claim, but it's pretty good. It usually comes out pretty nice. Okay, and you can see that it's nice and thick and it's coating the meatballs very well. And sometimes to really get the flavor in, I'll put these meatballs in a crock pot with the sauce and let it simmer for about 4 to 5 hours. And I think I'm actually going to do that because I really feel like eating flavorful meatballs tonight. So I'm actually going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in my crock pot. Okay, so here I have my meatballs in a crock pot. I have it on a low setting right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this up and I'm going to let it sit for about a few hours. And when it simmers, it allows the flavor to really absorb in the meatballs and in the sauce. And it also gives the sauce a little bit of thickness when you let it sit for a while. So if you need to do any housework, if you need to run any errands, you know, it's perfectly safe to slow cook. But we're gonna just leave this for a while and you can see the condensation forming up. That's perfectly fine. I'm gonna just let it sit for a while. And then once we're done, we can turn off the crock pot and serve it with our pasta of choice. So I have boiled some water here and I just put my spaghetti in. I boiled my water at like a medium setting, so that's between 3 and 4. It took me about maybe 15 minutes to get to a boiling point. Put my pasta in. I am gonna go ahead and boil for about 8 minutes. Now we're gonna bake some dinner bread to go with our spaghetti. And I have with me a baguette. While my spaghetti is cooking, I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the oven for about 10 minutes so it's nice and crispy. And I just put my bread directly on the rack. I don't put it in a pan or on a sheet. I just put it directly on the rack and bake for 10 minutes. So here's the meatball and marinara sauce that we've been marinating for a few hours. You notice that it is a lot thicker, so which is what I like. So we're gonna go ahead and add it to the pasta and serve it with our hot dinner bread. Okay, so here's the spaghetti and meatballs, and I have my hot dinner bread with some melted butter. So I have a little bit of grated Parmesan cheese on top of the spaghetti. And the good thing is I have a good bit of sauce and meatballs left over. And what I usually like to do when I make something that contains multiple servings is I like to have the leftovers. So what I'm going to do with the remaining meatballs and sauces, I'm probably going to make a meatball sub tomorrow when I pack for work. And I can probably cook some additional pasta for dinner tomorrow night. So I'll have a meatball sub for lunch tomorrow and then maybe make another pasta meatball sauce dish for dinner when I get home. But I just wanted you to see the finished product. I really love this sauce. This is one of my favorite creations. And the good thing about this is it doesn't take too long to make. You don't have to marinate it in the crock pot for a few hours if you don't want to, but it definitely does help with the taste. But this is really a nice breath of fresh air from the processed pre-packaged spaghetti sauce. Now, sometimes you got to do what you got to do if you don't have a lot of time to make dinner, but you can definitely taste the difference when you make your own sauce from scratch. So this concludes my video for today on spaghetti and meatballs. Please like, share, and subscribe below, and stay tuned for the next video. Bye for now.